the globe that is said to be warm, we already are stuck at a place where temperatures are warm. We all know that. So that raises a vulnerability. So in Ghana, there is only one place I have been to as an academic, and somebody has touted an advantage you can get from climate change. And it's a place where they manufacture or mine salt. So the salt mining process from the sea, you draw water from the sea, you allow it to evaporate, the salt will remain. So if there is more warming and less rainfall, then they are happy. But besides that, it will be difficult for Africa to claim a lot of advantages from warming because we are already very, very warm. Aside that, climate change poses a vulnerability to Africa because of the high levels of poverty. That is also tied in with how climate sensitive our livelihood is. So if you take any advanced industrialized nation, even those that do a lot of agriculture, the percentage of their population that will be earning livelihood directly from agriculture will be 2, 3, maximum 5%. Done. And if you allow such a country, if it's the US, Russia, or some other country, may be able to feed half of the world, possibly, but with very little population. Let's come to a typical African country. Ghana has done well if you compare to most African countries, but yet still, around 30% of our people are still directly earning a livelihood from agriculture and the resource-based, ecosystem-based resource adapt. So it positions Africa, in addition to low levels of technology. So a lot of the problems that comes with climate change requires engineering solutions. Is it bridges that have to be retooled or redone because they are not good for purpose because of extreme weather events associated with climate change, or sea level rise? Mostly in our part of the earth is Ghana, we don't have a lot of the sea level rise being the actual problem, but it's accentuating things like coastal erosion. So you go to places like Keita and the rest, you need to engineer your way out of the problem. Can we say that most African countries have the skills to do that? So when Africa is said to be the most vulnerable continent to the impact of climate change, it is not as if climate change is uniquely different for Africa. Even when it comes to temperature changes, research shows that it is the higher latitude interior continental regions that are actually increasing faster. But because of the vulnerabilities that exist, one area is institutional capacity. Do women and children get the support that they need in all aspects of life, in addition to adapting to climate change in Africa, as well as they would do in an advanced or a developed country? So these are challenges that make Africa very vulnerable. So tie into that, as I said, institutional support or strength is also the fact that the setup of the African system is such that in most societies there is very high gender inequality. And so if the resource base is ecosystem based and we are not, or agricultural, and we are not deriving a lot of resources because of climate change, then the problem of women education not being prioritized is now going to be aggravated. If we have money now from our cocoa farm for only one person to go to school, you probably will know that chances are that it's the boy child that will be given the nod. So this is why we say that Africa and the African woman or child is mostly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. But as I bring my presentation to a close, I would say that it's not all gloom and doom for us. We can do a lot. The women are agents of change. So I believe that giving opportunity and the support to women, they can do a lot. I've done quite some work looking at women's adaptation to climate change. And in works I've done in Sablugu and also in Wenchi and in the transition area specific, there is evidence to suggest that in some cases, women are adapting to climate change even better than men. In the case of Wenchi, the women say, we listen, we go to the market, we know what goes, so we plant different things from our husband. So when men are looking for large cornfields, women are doing small okra backyard and things, which fetches them money, and then they are doing better than their husbands. And then they say, oh, once we do better and we contribute to the upkeep of the household, then we get a voice in household decision making. So I thank the organizers for putting this together, for all of us to brainstorm. Even though we have a vulnerability, there is also the opportunity to support women and children, and then we can help to advance adaptation in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. And one of the things you mentioned in your submission just now was the fact that already within Africa we have high levels of poverty, as well as our tendency to have climate-sensitive livelihoods. Now, that brings us to how we go about our livelihoods. I want to give the floor now to Dr. Mavis to talk to us about issues around crop production, how we go about it, how it's been affected the most by climate change, and how we can improve it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emma. I'm glad to be here and to be part of this conversation. Advocating for agric, especially, is a passion, because I see food as our medicine. If we have enough food, we would have less illnesses. And we see climate change as one of the challenges that pose a lot of new illnesses and diseases in our globe now. And currently, there's so much effect on crop production. Averagely, in Africa, we know there are high consumption of rice. Rice alone is one of the staples that we depend on greatly. However, we are unable to meet demand. With the effects of climate change, such as high sea levels, which impact our farms. Prof mentioned the coastal areas in the Volta region, and we know Volta region is one of the big productions for rice in Ghana, for instance. And if they experience these high sea levels, it results in salinity of the soil, and this can impact yields of rice. Up to 60% of rice is lost to salts in our soils. Then we can also talk of drought. There are instances where farmers are expecting to see rain, however, they don't see it. Now, the pattern has changed so much that the time we know to plant isn't the same time anymore. And unfortunately, our farmers depend on rain. Most of the farms that we have in Ghana and in Africa depend on rain and not irrigation, considering the expenses that go into irrigated fields. Our dependence on the rain has caused low yields, both in vegetables, in cereals, and most especially in rice. And Ghana imports as much as over $500 million of rice. More than 50% of our rice is actually imported into Ghana. And I just read news on India banning rice exportation, which is going to be a big blow for Ghana, because about $100,000 of our rice is imported from India. So if climate change continues to go the way it is, affecting rainfall patterns, causing drought, that affects our farmers. It's not only going to reduce our crop production, it's going to cause poverty. It's also going to cause diseases, malnutrition, which affects mostly our children. Malnutrition alone kills so many children in the African sub-region. So it's a main challenge for children and for females, especially, because we take care of the home in terms of cooking. There's also the problem of chemical that we use, agrochemicals specifically, that we use on our farms. That also contributes to climate change. And in the case of finding solutions, women play a major role. Take, for instance, you're at home, you have finished cooking, you have some food waste. What do you do with that food waste? Do you just discard it, or do you turn it into biofertilizer? So if, for instance, we have our women being educated on how to use household waste to fertilize soils, for example, it would reduce the use of chemicals, and that would contribute to reducing the impact that humans cause into climate change effects. So these are some of the few things that I would want to talk about. And I just remembered about tomatoes. As Africans, we use tomatoes a lot. Every house uses tomatoes. Every meal in Ghana has tomato. Unfortunately, we are importing almost everything. And especially now with the crisis in the north, it's impacting tomato production, and we have to import from Burkina Faso. If Burkina Faso can make it, why can't we? So I would urge that as women, as children, it would take a lot of effort from the government in supporting. We need to support our own and invest in our own. We depend on foreigners, yes, but they are also looking out for themselves. So for impact for Africa, it will be best that investments come from Africa, so we can target directly what is important to us as Africans to be able to solve these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mavis, for that. When any society is under stress, when any society is suffering from the effects of climate change, the most vulnerable in those societies suffer most. And within our African context, we know that our women and our children are the most vulnerable. So I now give the floor to Nanama to bring to us the women's perspective. How are women impacted most by climate change, the challenges they have accessing land resources?
Thank you very much. So the two earlier speakers have actually set the context, and I don't think there is doubt that we are all experiencing the effects of climate change, and I don't think there is any doubt that the impact of climate change is not the same for different categories of people in the society. So I would want to focus on how we structure the interventions, the initiatives, and to what extent are we taking into account that different people are affected differently in our society. And I want to begin by saying that in the context of Africa, we are organized around ethnic groups, and ethnic groups have a certain kinship arrangements, and they are established within physical settlements called communities. Anytime there is a discussion, a conversation on climate change mitigation strategies, the focus is on how best to get the right actions done in a way that supports the mitigation of climate effects. Where does that start from? It is from our communities. But how are the communities set up in such a way that we can have the right actions properly integrated in the community practices to such an extent that daily we take steps that contribute to mitigating climate impacts? And that is where I think we need a lot of attention. Why? Because if you take Ghana as an example, we have various traditional areas And within the traditional areas, there is leadership. The paramount chief, divisional chiefs, sub-chiefs, community chiefs, and so on. Within this kinship arrangement is where decision-making, is where the daily administration of community governance, customary land governance occurs. When such administrative processes, governance processes are initiated and implemented, you would expect that we have the participation of both chiefs and queen mothers, so that the different perspectives of the issues would be taken into account to arrive at choices that benefit all. But it doesn't happen that way. And so you find out that as we are discussing climate change and we are discussing action towards mitigating the impact of climate change, you leave out a critical part of the system, of the community that is supposed to contribute to decision making, that is supposed to contribute to the administration of the system, that is able to contribute to the benefit sharing framework in which motivation is given for people to act. The other aspect which also is very critical is the fact that when you look at the entire, climate change strategies, climate mitigation strategies and so on, for Africa, a lot of it, like we have heard, is in the way we do our agricultural production. It's in the way the household is organized for various activities. The farming, the lumbering, the tree planting, the whatever. They are all related to what usually are referred to as the initiatives or forest sector initiatives or climate action and so on. But the way our land tenure system is organized is such that if you do not have the decision-making power over the land, then your choice, your decision to say, yes, I'm taking this action because it is contributing to mitigating climate impact, you don't have it. So in many traditional areas in Ghana, those who are non-indigents of a particular traditional area have difficulty making decisions on tree planting, except there is a government intervention to say, we are taking this area, we are planting. But even in that, if the decision making is not giving recognition to the different categories of people, then you realize that it becomes very difficult to have action on the ground. So the point is that apart from looking at the disaggregated impacts and how to ensure that those who are impacted are all brought to the table to be part of the conversation, to engage in solution, engage in right actions, we are also looking at the fact that the interventions need to mainstream the land tenure systems so that it gives recognition to different layers of powers, different layers of decision-making authority to influence actions and decisions and choices in the right way. The other thing that also is very critical to talk about, and I know it has been mentioned in different spaces, but I want to mention it for emphasis. It is about the terminologies and how technical these terminologies are. I have done some work across different landscapes in the country, and you would realize that many a time you talk to women, yes, we have heard that there is something called climate change, but what is it, and how should I engage with that concept? So it is not too clear, and for some of us, we believe that as people become more aware, they are well informed and they understand and they can relate to the concept, it makes it easy for them to now become advocates for themselves and with other people to be able to bring to bear positive steps towards mitigating the impact. So on the whole, I would like to say that yes, there are considerations to be given to the decision-making processes. There are considerations to be given to the local context and how the dynamics at the local level influences initiatives and interventions. There is also consideration to be given to the language, the technicalities, and how that can be related to the status or the situation of women girls and the youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Nanama. You really added to the discussion. The point that you made, your last point you made about involving women and children in the discourses, helping them to understand the terminologies, what some of the terms mean, and how they can be involved. Now, Prof, you work in education. How do you think we can get the next generation of climate activists on board? What is some of the work that you do in the universities that seeks to bring more people into the climate change discourse so that it can be widened and is not limited to just a few activists, a few academic, a few NGOs, some international actors?
Thank you very much. So we are doing a lot in terms of education and also inclusive education, educating our people in a way as to be able to communicate and also understand the issue. So my personal involvement with a lot of academics like Professor Yantia Mwabedu and the rest is that around 2010-11, the University of Ghana did not offer, unlike many other universities in Africa or the world, they didn't have structured courses on climate change. So we applied to the Open Society Foundation at the time. We were fortunate to get about 1.5 million US dollars to train human capital. So a lot of the people in the CSOs and NGO settings have come through that program. And one thing we did related to what Doc ended on was to add a form of communicating climate change. So we have Professor Audrey Gajepo, who is a communication expert, but one of the pillars in the climate change and sustainability education we offer. Almost everybody goes through her hands, and then we break the climate change down to a level such that we can engage effectively with communities. So we are learning, and we are also helping to provide the tools that can help the country deal with climate change. So I'll add that on that note, we have worked so hard, and GTech has just given us accreditation on that same program to offer a PhD in climate change. But we are looking at how to co-create knowledge, but not make it a traditional PhD where everything is in the classroom. The university now requires that for each PhD, you go into industry or the community for half a year, something that we call experiential learning, so that you understand the issues from the perspective of the person you are studying or the community. So these are some of the initiatives that we are putting up.
I think this is fantastic, because otherwise you have just a few people that are working on such an important subject. Mavis, maybe my final question to you as well. How do you think we can, because you already mentioned that women and children are mostly affected when it comes to low crop yields. How do you think, and we are trying to be positive here so that it's not all doom and gloom as has been said. How do you think we can get women, youth and children involved in the, first of all, in the discourses, secondly, in the action, thirdly, in implementations, and also helping to find solutions to the problems that we have?
Thank you very much. So when it comes to children, sometimes we see them as they don't know anything, or they don't understand what's going on. But they do. And thanks to the government, they've introduced climate change as a course. And my son, who is in Basic 2, is studying about climate change. And that's a good way to go, because the earlier you start to help them understand what climate change is, its impact, they would also start coming up with initiatives on how to battle climate change. I happened to get the opportunity to mentor some undergraduate students at Eric Yirenkyi University in Scotland. and it was basically about climate change. I was amazed at the in-depth knowledge that the children had about climate change. I was actually blown away. And to hear them speak about some of the ways that we can reduce the impact of climate change, reduce global warming, was amazing. So we should involve children in discussions. They understand more than we think they do. So let's not put them on the side when we are discussing such serious issues. So for women in their everyday lives are able to innovate. Women are inventors. And with the knowledge and resources if given them, they'll be able to do more than we imagine them to. A woman, as Prof mentioned, will think of her small backyard as enough to farm. That woman will think of not pouring my wastewater away, using it to water my plants. So from those little things that we think do not contribute to combating climate change, they do a lot. It starts very little. Nothing is too little to start with in finding solutions to climate change.
Nothing is too little indeed. We'd like to thank you. Dr. Emma, will you take over and wrap up, please? Thank you very much. Shall we give our panelists a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?
Would like to thank our panelists once again. Nanama, thank you so much for bringing those very important perspectives on women, as well as how they are affected by the land tenure system and the positive aspect of it. Prof, thank you so much for helping us to understand the issues a lot more. And to Mavis, thank you so much for coming, as well as to helping us to understand how we are impacted by crop production, as well as the low yields, and how we can look forward into the future. We sincerely thank you and appreciate you for honoring AFRIWOCC's invitation to join us in this conference. Thank you so much for that. Can we give them a round of applause once again?
And thank you very much, Dr. Emma Brinkrang, our moderator. Thank you very much, our panelists, Dr. Mavis Osei Owusu, Professor Kwadwo Owusu, Nana Mayira. Thank you very much. We would like to